So where I'm at with the car now is I believe that the noise is coming from the heads. It does not sound like it's coming from the bottom end. I hear the noise loudest when I put my ear up to the intake. I don't believe that there's any bottom end noise, but it is possible that the noise in the heads is so loud that I might not be hearing what's going on in the bottom end. I'm really hoping that the reason for such low compression numbers is because the engine sat for 5 years without being started once, and there's no oil in the rings, and the rings need that oil to seal up properly, and it's very possible that they were stuck, which was not allowing them to do their job, because the first time it had been cranked in 5 years was to do that compression test. So if that was a scenario, then me driving it around, doing a burnout in it, would definitely help free up those rings, and it's possible that the compression is better now. I'm gonna pull the motor out of it today, that's my goal, and best case scenario, I replace some lifters or something in the head, maybe put brand new piston rings on as long as all the pistons aren't destroyed or too loose in the cylinder. So I'm just gonna get the motor out and we'll take it from there. It's been a long ass day. I had a lot of doubts in my mind about what I wanted to do with the car in terms of like deleting the air conditioning and other systems like that, because it makes it easy to work on, less problems and things of that nature. But I really wanted to keep some of that stuff. This is my first time working on a 4-valve ever, and it is so complicated. There is so little space because of how large the heads are, and everything was such a nightmare to remove. I mean, it wasn't awful, but it was just extremely time consuming how many things there were, and to take them all apart without destroying them. So I definitely am gonna delete absolutely everything that's not necessary on the car at all for drifting, and just simplify it as much as I possibly can. As you can see, I got everything all out. Engine bay needs a good detail now, but good Lord, it's a mess even with. So I'm actually really happy with the condition of the car. Pretty much all of these clips and all the factory stuff on it looks like it had never been touched whatsoever. So I don't believe that this engine has ever been pulled out before. I didn't find any weird wiring or weird modifications that were done to the car. So That's pretty exciting. As you can see, I had to cut off the exhaust because this H-pipe is actually something that someone just made. They cut off the factory shit and they just welded pipe all the way. So this connection right here to the header goes all the way to the tailpipe without any other places of removal. So I had to remove it from the headers, and as you can see on this side where they did their custom fabrication, when this was in the car, this O2 sensor was literally impossible to remove and this bolt was literally impossible to get to. So I just cut it off. I'll probably put long tubes on it and do whatever. So here's the engine. It's upside down right now. First thing we did was we checked out what it looks like underneath the valve covers. And guys, holy shit, look at how clean this is. This is amazing color. It's not all brown and sludgy. The camshafts and all the lobes are all smooth. There's no real problems with any of them. All the teeth on the gears, they look like they're brand new, not worn down at all. The chains look good. I was blown away by how good everything looked. We spun it over and we took off. So if the lobe is facing up like it is right here, the lifter doesn't have tension on it, and you can tell if it's a little bit loose or wiggly. So I tested them all and it all turned out great, which is great news, but it's not whatever the source of the problem was. So we flipped the engine over, and I mean, it looks freaking phenomenal down here as well. Everything looks really clean. Look at the teeth on that gear. Look at how sharp and clean they are. It's not worn down barely at all. I mean, well, actually that gear never has a chain on it, so that explains that. But so we were looking into the pistons. So that cylinder looks phenomenal. All the pistons looked like they were in good condition. The crank looks like it's in awesome condition. And I was starting to worry because I checked all the low compression cylinders and everything seemed like it was fine, and I couldn't really, there was nothing obvious about whatever that noise was coming from. So I was getting a little bit concerned. And then I looked at number 8. So number 8 is usually a problem child because the head gets very hot, and that's why you do the head cooling mod, which is when you take this connection and you connect it to this freeze plug that's over here, and it allows the coolant to flow through it freely. As you can see, this is the side that has the freeze plug, and the rod is bent actually. Look at how bent that rod is. I've never seen a bent rod before, but that shit's messed up. So what happened is the rod got bent, the piston came down further than it was supposed to, and as you can see, there's a huge chunk of the piston missing. That's from it hitting on the crankshaft because it came down so far because the stroke is now shorter, and the crankshaft ate that shit up. There's a little gouge right there, and that's pretty much about it. There's really no other damage done to it at all. So the crank looks like it's good. That rod and piston obviously need to be replaced, which then means that everything's going to have to be rebalanced to make sure all the bearing and tolerances are correct. So it doesn't look like it went all the way to the top, which is phenomenal. And the reason I know that this piston broke as a result of the rod bending is because the bottom is cracked, not the top. So that leaves me with a lot of questions, because this is if the engine block looks that phenomenal and it's factory horsepower level and it looks like the oil's been changed at regular intervals and whatnot, what caused that rod to bend? Is it possible they might have had a nitrous system or something on there at one point? I don't think so. I mean, I went all the way through the engine bay. The only wire I found that wasn't factory was for the autometer water temp gauge. I looked in the interior. It doesn't look like there's anything that's been ran. Nothing on the intake, no weird holes that have been plugged. So if they did it, they covered their tracks really well. I really think that was the scenario. It's very possible that with that cold air intake that puts that air filter right by the wheel well, that a bunch of water got sucked up into it, which isn't that likely because it's not that low, but it is a possible scenario that it got water into that cylinder. It's possible the fuel injector was putting too much fuel in there for whatever reason, and that could have bent it or something, or just got weak from 20 plus years, 140,000 miles of abuse on it. So I'm really not sure what I want to do as a result of this. I was kind of hoping that the bottom end was good and I could just fix maybe a lifter or something in the top end, put the motor back together and just go beat the shit out of it. And then over time, save up money, do the standalone. And if I turbo it, I want to do it right. I'm going to put MMR everything in that short block that I have. I'm going to put a standalone ECU, make sure the turbo kit is put together as properly as possible with high quality parts, no Chinese stuff. But now that I believe the heads are good, which is awesome because that means I can take those heads off, do a little bit of work to them, and then throw them on the short block that I have. But I don't necessarily, that short block is like 9.5 to 1 compression ratio, and it has a large piston ring gap because it is set up for high boost, and it's not going to be that phenomenal of an engine power wise for just a naturally aspirated situation. It's going to be reliable as it gets though. It's definitely would take the abuse of drifting very, very well. It's ready to go, but I'm definitely going to turbo it one day and do all that stuff. I just don't want to wear the engine NA and then put the turbo on it later and have to worry about the engine already being worn and stuff like that. So I'm gonna figure out pretty much, I'm gonna talk to a couple different people, get some opinions on what's like the bare minimum that I can do to reliably be able to go and drive this car. If I change out that piston and that connecting rod, it's most likely that it's gonna need to maybe be honed. I have to check the bearing clearances and everything and make sure that it's all balanced and happy with that different piston and rod that's in there. I've heard that people on these cars even put in Boss 302 connecting rods because they're like $30 a piece and they'll handle up to like 800 horsepower. So it's possible I could just throw all those rods in it. Maybe 03, 04 Cobra pistons or something. But then again, to do that correctly, I'm going to spend $2,000 after all the machining work is done. And why did I buy that long block if that's just what I'm going to do? So I'm not too confident. By the next video, I'll definitely have more of a plan and we'll go from there on it. I'm honestly pretty happy with what I found, and I'm also blown the fuck away that I did that burnout and the engine ran as good as it did. I mean, you saw how big of a chunk is missing out of that piston and how bent that damn rod is. And this thing ran like a damn trooper. Like, yeah, it probably didn't feel like it had as much horsepower as it should have, but like, that's pretty serious. That's the way that that happened. The way that it broke is a once in a million thing, and the fact it didn't do more damage to the engine is pretty phenomenal. The bearings look awesome. Really didn't look like it did much damage at all. So I'm hoping that we can get by with doing the bare minimum on it just to get this thing back on the road ASAP, because I'm dying to get some seat time. But so now we got 2 projects in the shop that have blown motors, so that's exciting. But I really appreciate it. If you're watching this right now, it means you made it all the way through the shit, and I appreciate you guys more than you know. If you're watching this, it means that you're helping making my dream come true. I'd really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and in the next video, we'll have a little bit more action for you. So thank you for watching.